I'm just doing a therapy here. Enjoy. Hey, I have had kind of quite a week. I am chronically ill, so I'm kind of always sick, but this week I've been extra super duper mooper sick. Just a lot of barfing. A lot of barfing. However, I did not barf last night, and I have not barfed today. And that made me think, Arista sees the friggin' moment, Carpe the DM, and this is my first tattoo ever. It's really important to me that this channel and like the content that I create on the internet feels like real life and feels authentic, and authentically I'm having some big time self-doubts, so I'm gonna put on some makeup because that usually helps. This is a really unflattering angle. I want to talk about family because I feel like if you have a fucky family, there's ways to talk about it that are publicly accepted and ways to talk about it that aren't. And I don't know what defines a fucky family. And I can't really say that I know my extended family enough to call them that. Fucky or family, I guess. I'm an only child. It should be evident by everything that I do ever in the world for all time. Amen. I'm a pretty prototypical only child. To my understanding, which is, you know, pretty limited, my parents have never been together in my lifetime. In fact, I'm pretty sure they were casually sleeping together when I was conceived, and my mom had no intention of telling my dad that she was pregnant or having him be a part of my life, but a friend convinced her to. This is the wrong brush for this. So my father didn't really have much of a say in the matter, which I can imagine is pretty tough. I would never ever want to initiate a conversation wherein the bodily autonomy of the person with the uterus is like lessened in any way, because that's already something we have to fight so hard for. For the other contributing parent, regardless of whether or not you choose to be a part of that child's life, it's still impactful. My mom told him when she was about 7 months pregnant, so it was far past the point where she could have had an abortion. So I can't imagine how difficult it would have been to make that phone call. Just like, surprise, you will be a father. And I can't imagine how difficult it would be to receive it. There's a couple things that contribute to how little I know my family. One of them is that I grew up in a completely different province. So I lived in Alberta, my mom's family lived in Manitoba, and my father's family lived in BC, mostly. I was pretty separated from extended family, although there's a lot of people in Edmonton that I really consider like family. And my mom was really active in seeking out other parents with kids my age, so I grew up with this kind of like very weird extended network of family friends who, like, if I go back to Edmonton, I know, and I'm still in contact with a lot of them. So that was kind of my family as a young person, because I knew my extended family so little. My mom was single pretty much my whole life. My parents are not friends and never have been. I think they hate each other pretty intensely. And because they weren't dating, because they've never been together, I don't have anyone in my life at this point other than my mom who's ever met my dad. And my mom, I don't think, has seen him in probably 30 years. In the same way, maybe other than Matthew, there's very few people in my life right now who have ever met my mom. So I'm kind of this weird floating ship amongst all these people because I've lived in multiple different places, I have friends in multiple different places, my parents live in different places, and no one really knows anybody. That makes it really hard. It makes it really hard to believe yourself and believe your own experiences when there isn't really anyone to back you up. I do feel like, this is incredible what I'm doing right now. Look. I look so much for this. What's happening? Oh. Having people who have met my parents, or, you know, the family friends that I mentioned that were around when I was young, are wildly helpful. My parents are very nice, privileged white people. Both of them have university education. Both of them did professional work or do professional work. When you meet them, you're not like, oh shit, you're fucked. That has had a really weird impact on my life because they are, and so am I, but in a very socially acceptable way. And also I think both of my parents and I are sort of masters at not letting anyone know how fucked up we are. One of the things that's difficult for me when talking about my parents is that I don't feel like they belong to me, and I don't feel like I belong to them. And so it's really difficult to navigate, like, what is my story to tell and what isn't. But I am from them. My mother was a speech pathologist who worked with disabled kids, mostly autistic kids, and I think that she was really good at her job. And my dad, I laugh for a reason, my dad is a academic and a counselor, or I guess a psychologist would be the word, who specializes in family and relationship psychology. Yeah. Because of that, I started therapy when I was like 7 or 8, maybe 9. And I think it saved my life. And because I had parents who had medical benefits and consistent work and those kinds of things, I was able to access those services weekly. I think I had therapy like basically weekly from like age 9 to age 18, age 17. In a lot of ways, like my therapist, because I had the same therapist I had the same private therapist. I also saw a group therapist, a family and relationship therapist with both my parents. But that therapist, I think, like basically just parented me in a lot of ways. I feel like when I look back at the therapy that I had as a young person, it was mostly just my therapist being like, you are not trash, which was really what I needed at the time to sort of keep me afloat, but wasn't really like therapy. I mean, I guess it was therapy in the sense that it was allowing me to continue. It was allowing me to survive. Just drooling. I had this lifeline from a really, really early age, outside of my parents. Is that like a lot of eyebrow? Sorry. I'm gonna talk about abuse here. Mostly emotional and verbal throughout this whole video, so if that's not your jam. If you don't love emotional and verbal abuse, maybe just tune out. Sorry, I'm just trying to soften my eyebrows up a little bit. I feel like I got a little carried away. I don't want to like carve them out Instagram influencer style, but I do want to just soften them a bit. So when I go back to Edmonton now, even like what I would consider close family friends, closer family friends, were not aware of my mom's abuse. I think that's usually sort of how abuse works, right? It's really difficult to talk about parents. And like, I'm 30, so I get it. Like, at some point, I just have to be a person outside of them. And I think there's space to sort of acknowledge how impactful they are, but also acknowledge that like they're both people. And I'm not making this to try to like villainize either of my parents, but I'm hoping that talking a bit about my childhood and my relationship to family will set me free a bit, because there has been this like very unspoken, we don't talk about this rule. My mom is Mennonite. Her parents were pretty religious. They were pretty traditional. There were a lot of ideas about morality. I remember my mom telling me that she would go to church sermons and the pastor would preach about the like terrors of lipstick. Is it pastor? I don't even fucking know. That's how bad I am. The religious official. I'm gonna talk about the like dangers of things like lipstick, and a lot of the ideals of that world outside of the religion really played out in our home. So a lot of the ways that I feel like I just like move in the world, which are, you know, I'm boisterous and I'm assertive and I'm not unapologetic, but certainly not godly. Those weren't strengths. Being a little weirdo kid who bingo dabbed their hair because they weren't allowed to dye it didn't play out super well with my mom's parents, and neither did having a child out of wedlock. But my grandparents, rather than excommunicating us, which to my understanding was on the table, they showed up. My mom's parents, my grandparents, were a part of my life. Small, in a small way, and always with this sort of stipulation of when are you going to find the right path. As an adult, moving to Winnipeg, I got to spend some time with my grandmother, and that was really transformative for me because I got to understand so much of the ways that my mom had treated me, which were really different than any of my friends, were rooted in Mennonite things and weren't like specifically my mom things. And it really helped me to understand this like broader context. My mom had two sort of quite close family friends, and by the end of my leaving Edmonton and moving to Jasper, she was no longer in contact with either of them. I'm sure it's for many reasons, and it's not my place to speak to those relationships, but I know that the way that my mom was raising me and treating me was a big part of it, and that these two friends were both people that I had turned to for support as a young person, and so they kind of heard a lot about what was going on, and both of them, to my knowledge, aren't in contact with my mom. You shut out and you push back against anything that isn't validating. My dad was a much bigger part of my life when I was younger, which is just to say, he never really was a big part of my life, but I think he was more active in my life when I was younger. He did a lot of really sweet things. Like, he was a musician once upon a time, and he had like recorded a bunch of tapes of him reading children's stories, and he was pretty active. I remember that. I remember speaking with him more often. He also had a partner at the time who was my stepmom, and I was quite close to. That sort of dwindled. I think a lot of that was because I really pushed back against it. When I was maybe 7 or 8, my dad showed up for this like yearly vacation that we took in the summer that was usually about 2 weeks long. And he showed up without my stepmom, and like they were married. She had been a part of every interaction that I ever remember having with my dad, and I loved her very much. I was very, very much like just infatuated with her as a kid because she was really warm and playful, and that's not something that my mom has really ever been. He showed up without her and was kind of just like, we got a divorce. Which, like, I'm laughing because I've had literally 23 years of therapy about this, but as a family and relationship psychologist, it's not maybe the best way to go about informing a 7-year-old that they won't see one of their parents ever again. And I actually didn't ever see her again. I think we ran into her, and because of the way that my dad is, she was very angry. And that was the only, I mean, we didn't interact. We pulled up at a stoplight next to her and she was there and she glared at us. And I really took that to heart as a young person. You know, I carried a lot of my stepmother with me, and it informs a lot of how I move in the world. Even though it was so young, it left me with a real profound insecurity about mattering, because this was someone who, you know, mattered so much to me, and then all of a sudden she was just gone and I never spoke to her again or heard from her again. And yes, every therapist I have ever had has tried to convince me to contact her, but I think what I've learned is that the memories that I have of her and who she is to me is much more about me than it is about her. And so connecting with her would be bringing in a whole bunch of expectations, and I just forgive her. Like, I understand why a clean break would be needed from my father. I mean, I think I've done that like 20 times in my life. I've just been like, don't fucking talk to me. So I get it. So that was one of my sort of like foundational experiences of family was, I mean, very sadly, the sort of profound impact of that was me feeling like I had somehow as a child misinterpreted that this person cared about me and that I actually just didn't matter all that much. My relationship to my dad is maybe the most complicated thing about me. There's so many years of just yuck that it's beyond ever being okay. I think that by like 14, there was just not ever going to be a way to come back from it. I'm taking up all this space talking about my family and my parents, and I know that for some people, they'll hear this and be like, but he's your father. The most powerful memory I have of my father is being maybe 13 or 14 in family counseling. I had been prompted to sort of like tell my dad how I felt, and I told him, you know, that direct quote, I feel like you walked into my life and expected me to love you for me. And my dad laughed. And not like necessarily in a cruel way, but just like that what I had said was so ludicrous. And it wasn't. It was real life. It was real life. And there's all the stuff with, you know, my stepmother and how that was handled, but also just a lot of years of things that made me feel really uncomfortable in an attempt to forge this relationship with me, a young person who had very little contact with men and who didn't really feel safe around adult men because I was being raised in a single parent household with my mom and I saw my dad maybe once a year. He often tried to bridge conversations that were maybe more intimate, or yeah, it felt like a lot of violating my boundaries. It was a lot of years of me pretending that I was afraid of being on an airplane because I didn't want to fly to see my dad. And I knew that you were supposed to want to see your dad, and not wanting to be touched by him, but knowing that you were supposed to want to hug your dad. And like so many years of that, and a lot of just like really inappropriate things that he did, led to just so much discomfort. I have a very visceral reaction to my dad. I'm not able to touch him or be touched by him. I know what he smells like, and if I smell it, I have a vomit response. I think because of just so many years of forced affection, discomfort. You know, outside of that one memory of my dad, the most poignant thing that I've ever, the best way that I can sum up my relationship to my father is that when I was maybe 18, 20, one of my friends was studying at the University of, I'm not going to say where, one of my friends was studying at a university, and he was an instructor at that university, and they had found his bio, and it referenced me. And at this point, like, I hadn't really been in contact with him for years, and when I was about 10, I just told my dad, I don't want to talk to you anymore. And then that continued off and on, basically my whole life, just like complete no contact. And then I would talk to him a little bit, and it would be awful, and then we would go no contact, and I would talk to him a little bit, and it'd be awful. One of my friends had found his bio. I'm not doing any makeup. One of my friends had found his bio for this university, and in it he had said, you know, me, this person, is a father to Arista, who is a musician and an avid outdoors person. And at that point, I hadn't done anything musical in, 6 years. I'd gone to a performing arts high school. Was like very, very, very deeply invested in theater. And I lived in Edmonton and like literally never went outside and worked at Starbucks. And didn't really like being outside. And there's probably, like, anyone who had met me one time for more than a second would have had like 40 other ways to describe me than these two descriptors, musician and avid outdoors person. But my father was a musician and loved to hike and was an avid outdoors person. My most generous and compassionate understanding is that this is someone who had parenthood foisted upon them without a choice, and who maybe had a lot of really idealized notions of what that was going to look like. You know, I learned later that he had really fought my mom on things like child support. Yeah, he's a family and relationship psychologist. I mean, I get it. Everyone who has family who are professionals knows that, like, people don't necessarily carry that knowledge through into their real life, but one would presume that with a specialty in family and relationship psychology, you would know not to laugh at your child when they express a fearful emotion. But I guess not, you know? I guess not. My mom... So, unlike my dad, who, you know, doesn't have my phone number, has never been to my house, met my partner basically by force because he introduced himself at my grandfather's funeral, doesn't know Matthew's last name. We're married, but that's cool. He has so little connection to my life that he feels very safe. He also does, he lives in BC, so he's far away. He feels like someone who is okay for me to be on the periphery. I don't feel like my life or my sense of well-being is at threat from the fact that he can email me, which is really nice. My mom, I do feel that. So, I thought I just eyeshadowed my boob. My mom lives in Winnipeg, I think. At least she did last time I spoke with her, which was I think about 3.5, 4 years ago. And I think she's just super not well. She did a lot of indescribably harmful things. I think She is a person, and I left home at 17 after my mom refused to speak to me for several weeks or acknowledge me. My mom was a very nice white lady who did a lot of soups harmful things. And like I said, a lot of people in my life were totally unaware of how, like, I think about friends of parents and people who spent time with my mom. There's a lot of people who just genuinely had no idea what was going on. The main sort of crux of my mom's abuse has always been that being loved is a privilege that can be taken away, and therefore everything can be taken away. And so as a very young person, I was taught that it was a privilege to be taken care of, and it was a privilege to be loved, and I had to earn that, and that if I didn't earn it, it would be taken away. And so I, at multiple times as a teenager, lived with family friends for a period of time. I moved out at 17. And loss of home, so being told that I was going to be kicked out, was sort of like the primary mechanism of control. Which is why I think as an adult, this home and a sense of home is so important to me. I'm not in contact with my mom at all. She does not know where I live, which is really nice. Really, really nice. Because for a while, when I first went no contact with her, she would like mail me things that were really manipulative to try and sort of like get me back on her side. We were very close when I was younger, in a really sort of unhealthy way. And I'm trying to decide which color I want to use here. This is kind of beautiful. I never use greens. I used to really hate green because my mom's houses, all the walls were green. Like everything in the house was fucking green. So it's a yucky color for me for a long time. So having had these parents and these experiences obviously shaped me. In some pretty profound ways. First and foremost, it made me know that I never wanted to parent because I knew that all the ways that both my parents had figured out how to take care of me and tried to love me hadn't come from a place of wanting to cause harm. Even when it is about wanting to cause harm, it's usually just like a lash out response rather than like some sort of curated like, this is how I'm gonna get you. Regardless of intent, it was still shitty as hell and I barely survived it. I didn't ever want to do that to anyone. And I knew that the amount of work that I would need to do to work through my shit and the ways that I responded and the ways that I figured out how to survive was like, oh, so much fallout, was like basically an entire lifetime's worth of work that I wouldn't have time in my life to both heal and figure out how not to fuck up another person and also raise a child and have a child. So I chose not to. Ooh, it's kind of cool. I thought a lot about love. And to me, it feels really important to sort of clarify love. Yeah, I want to clarify love. When I think about love, I think about two different things. First, I think about the physiological experience that you as an individual have of love, where you feel it and it's sort of painful and powerful and beautiful, and there's like this desire for closeness and this desire for expression. At least for me, that's what love feels like, and safety, and love feels really great. It is also different from acts of love, and I feel like we conflate these things, and as someone who has had like a pretty significant amount of experiences of abuse, it's a very important clarification to me, which is that you can love me. You can love me, and for you that's this experience of like warmth and tenderness and affection and pain and I was about to say love, but you know, you feel love. You experience this physiological emotional sensation of love without that really having much to do with me. That's about you and your experience of love. I mean, I don't know about my father, but I know without a doubt that my mother feels that way about me. That she has this personal physiological experience of love. People have always told me, don't you know how much your parents love you? And I'm really glad that they, you know, at least my mom, I don't know about my dad, but at least my mom has that experience of love, because I think it's beautiful and I think it's like magic, basically, right? It's magic. It's real life magic. I'm not here to shit on that. That's awesome. It also, I don't have to be a part of it. She can have that experience of love and still cause a lot of harm, because that experience of love is about her. It's not about me. It's about how she feels. I feel like the best love that I've been given is when someone experiences that love for you and then also does that love. So I really resent, and I really want to like separate these two concepts of like love. You are not beholden to how someone else experiences their feelings for you. They are entitled to them. I hope it's helpful for them. I hope it feels good. I hope it's positive. I hope it feels true. Most of my life, people's experiences of love for me, so how they physically feel about loving me, has been used as a weapon of like, why don't you give your parents another chance? Or why don't you hug your dad? He loves you so much. People are entitled to feel how they're gonna feel, and you're entitled to not having that impact how you choose to have those people in your life. I don't have to have someone in my life because they experience love for me. I can choose to have someone in my life because the way that they love me is helpful and glorious and magical and blah. I'm not alone in the experiences that I had as a young person, and this idea of your parents love you, so you should X, Y, Z, is not new or exclusive to me. If you're navigating a relationship that's harmful or abusive or whatever, I would encourage you to maybe think about it like that. I would also encourage you to think about love as a thing that you do, and like, how do you do love? I hope that if you have a family who doesn't love you in the way that you need to be loved, who is harmful to you, you have found other ways to build family. And I I understand how alone and scary it is. And thank you to, you know, all the teachers who would hug me at recess because I was that kid, or the, you know, parents of my friends who taught me how to ride a bike, or told me that I was wonderful or valuable or important, and in doing so, probably saved my life. Part of why I feel pretty at peace with not having children is because I've seen how you can show up and parent yourself, which is kind of what I'm trying to do now as an adult. Figure out how to reparent in a lot of ways. And also show up and be family for the people who need it. The end. If you like this video full of pain and sorrow, please hit like and subscribe. Thanks, bye. Then bye. Do like my makeup, bye.